The Haunted Ship. Exploring a Haunted Ship. Part 1. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Letter. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet town by the sea, there lived a young man named Jack. Jack loved adventure and was always looking for something new to explore. One day, while walking along the beach, he found a bottle washed ashore. Inside the bottle was an old, yellowed piece of paper. It looked like a letter. Curious, Jack opened it and began to read. The letter was written in shaky handwriting and said, "Underscore to the one who finds this letter. I warn you. Stay away from the Black Pearl. It is a cursed ship, haunted by the spirits of the lost. Do not seek it, for it brings only danger and sorrow. Underscore." Jack's heart raced as he finished reading the letter. A haunted ship. Could it be real? He had heard stories of the Black Pearl from the old sailors in town. They said it was a ghost ship that appeared on foggy nights, drifting silently across the water. No one who boarded it ever returned. But Jack was not afraid. In fact, he was excited. He decided then and there that he would find the Black Pearl and discover its secrets. Chapter 2. The Preparation. Jack knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help. He went to see his best friend, Sarah, who was as brave as she was clever. Sarah was always up for an adventure, and when Jack told her about the letter and the haunted ship, her eyes lit up with excitement. "We have to go, Jack. This could be the adventure of a lifetime," Sarah exclaimed. They began to prepare for their journey. They packed a bag with food, water, a map of the sea, and a flashlight. Jack also brought along a notebook to write down everything they discovered. Before they set off, they visited Old Ben, the oldest sailor in town. Old Ben had sailed the seas for many years and knew every story about the Black Pearl. "Ah, the Black Pearl," Old Ben said, his voice low and serious. "Many have tried to find it, but none have returned. If you are set on this journey, be careful. The ship is not like any other. It is said to be alive, and it does not welcome visitors." Jack and Sarah thanked Old Ben for his advice. They were more determined than ever to find the ship and solve its mystery. Chapter 3. Setting Sail. The next morning, Jack and Sarah set sail in a small boat they borrowed from the dock. The sky was cloudy, and the sea was calm. They sailed far from the shore, following the directions on the map. As they sailed deeper into the sea, a thick fog began to rise. It was so dense that they could barely see in front of them. But they continued on, trusting their instincts. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. The fog grew thicker, and the air became colder. Just when they were about to lose hope, they saw it. A dark shape in the distance, barely visible through the fog. It was the Black Pearl. The ship was enormous, with torn sails and a broken mast. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. It floated silently on the water, as if waiting for them. Jack and Sarah's hearts pounded in their chests. They had found the haunted ship, but now they had to explore it. Chapter 4 Boarding the Haunted Ship. Jack and Sarah carefully approached the Black Pearl. They tied their boat to the side of the ship and climbed aboard. The deck creaked under their feet, and the air was filled with the smell of salt and decay. They walked slowly across the deck, looking around. The ship was empty, with no sign of life. But they could feel something strange, as if they were being watched. "Let's check below deck," Sarah whispered. Jack nodded, and they made their way to the stairs leading down. The lower deck was dark and cold. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the walls were covered in green moss. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the walls were covered in green moss. The floor was wet and slippery, and every step echoed through the empty ship. As they walked deeper into the ship, they heard a noise. It was a soft, low moaning sound, like the wind, but more eerie. They stopped and listened. The sound grew louder, filling the air around them. Jack's hand tightened around the flashlight. "What is that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her eyes wide with fear. "But we have to keep going." They continued down the dark hallway until they reached a door. It was old and rusty, and the wood was cracked. Jack pushed it open, and they stepped inside. Chapter 5 The Ghostly Encounter. Inside the room, they found something they didn't expect. A large chest sat in the middle of the floor, covered in dust. Jack and Sarah exchanged a glance. Could this be treasure? Jack walked over to the chest and carefully opened it. Inside, they found old, torn clothes, a few gold coins, and a small, locked box. The box was made of dark wood and had strange symbols carved into it. Sarah picked up the box and turned it over in her hands. "This must be important," she said. "But how do we open it?" Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut. They spun around, but no one was there. The room grew colder, and the strange moaning sound returned, louder than before. Jack and Sarah backed away from the chest, their hearts racing. "Let's get out of here," Jack shouted. They ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. It was stuck, as if something was holding it shut. The whispers grew louder, turning into voices. They could hear them clearly now, speaking in a language they didn't understand. The shadows on the walls twisted and turned, forming shapes of people, ghosts from the past. Jack and Sarah huddled together, terrified. They had found the haunted ship, but now they were trapped. What was going to happen to them? Would they become part of the ship's ghostly crew? Chapter 6 Escape ... or not. Just when they thought all hope was lost, the door suddenly burst open. A cold wind rushed in, and the voices stopped. The shadows disappeared, leaving the room silent once again. Jack grabbed Sarah's hand, and they ran out of the room and up the stairs to the deck. They didn't stop until they were back on their boat, untying the rope as fast as they could. As they sailed away from the Black Pearl, the fog began to lift. The ship slowly disappeared from view, sinking back into the mist. Jack and Sarah were safe, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun to uncover the ship's dark secrets. What was in the locked box, and why did the ship let them go? They knew they had to return to the Black Pearl to find out the truth, but they also knew it wouldn't be easy. The ship was haunted, and it didn't want its secrets to be revealed. As they sailed back to shore, Jack and Sarah promised each other that they would return to the Black Pearl. The adventure was far from over, and they were determined to solve the mystery of the haunted ship. Stay tuned for part 2, where Jack and Sarah return to the Black Pearl and face even greater dangers. Will they uncover the ship's secrets, or will they become part of its ghostly crew? The Haunted Ship, Exploring a Haunted Ship, Part 2. Chapter 7, The Decision to Return. Jack and Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the Black Pearl. Even after returning home, the memory of their terrifying experience haunted them. They kept wondering about the locked box they had found and the strange symbols carved into it. What secrets did it hold? Why did the spirits on the ship let them escape? Days passed, but Jack and Sarah couldn't focus on anything else. They knew they had to go back, no matter how dangerous it was. The mystery of the haunted ship was too compelling to leave unsolved. One evening, they met at the small cafe by the sea where they always planned their adventures. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. "We have to go back," Jack said, breaking the silence. "I know it's risky, but we can't just leave it like this. There's something on that ship that needs to be discovered." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I've been thinking the same thing. But this time, we need to be better prepared. We need to understand what we're dealing with." They decided to visit Old Ben again. Maybe he could tell them more about the ship and the strange box they had found. Chapter 8, Old Ben's Warning. The next morning, Jack and Sarah went to see Old Ben. The old sailor was sitting on the porch of his small, weathered house by the sea, whittling a piece of wood. When they told him about their experience on the Black Pearl, Old Ben's face grew serious. He put down his knife and looked at them with concern. "You're lucky to be alive," he said in a grave voice. "The Black Pearl is not just any ship. It's a gateway between this world and the next. The spirits on that ship are restless, trapped between life and death, and they don't like visitors." Jack showed him the drawing he had made of the symbols on the box. Old Ben's eyes widened when he saw them. "These symbols are ancient," he said. "They belong to a time long before any of us were born. They were used to seal away powerful forces, things that should never be disturbed." "What's in the box?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Old Ben replied, shaking his head. "But I do know this. Whatever is inside, it was never meant to be found. If you open that box, you might release something far worse than just a ghost." Jack and Sarah exchanged worried glances, but they were also more determined than ever. They needed to know the truth, no matter the cost. Be careful. Old Ben warned them. If you go back to the Black Pearl, you may not come back. The spirits will be watching you, and they won't let you leave so easily this time. Chapter 9: The Return to the Black Pearl. Despite Old Ben's warnings, Jack and Sarah prepared to return to the Black Pearl. This time, they brought more supplies, salt, candles, and a book on ancient symbols that they had found in the local library. They hoped these things would help protect them from the ship's dark forces. The night they chose for their return was dark and stormy. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the shore. It was the perfect night for a ghost ship to appear. They sailed out into the sea, guided only by the faint light of the moon behind the clouds. The fog began to rise again, just as it had before. Jack and Sarah held their breath, waiting for the ship to appear. Suddenly, out of the mist, the Black Pearl emerged. It looked exactly as they remembered, dark, silent, and ominous. The ship seemed to be waiting for them. They tied their boat to the side of the ship and climbed aboard once more. The deck was as creaky and cold as before, but this time they felt an even stronger presence, as if the ship itself was alive and aware of their arrival. Jack and Sarah made their way below deck, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. They reached the room where they had found the chest, and there it was, just as they had left it. The small wooden box sat on top, its strange symbols glowing faintly in the darkness. Chapter 10: Unlocking the Box. Jack and Sarah stood over the box, their hearts pounding. They knew that opening it could unleash something terrible, but they couldn't turn back now. They had come too far. Are you ready? Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded. Let's do it. Jack carefully took out a small tool from his bag and began to pick the lock. The box resisted at first, as if something inside didn't want to be disturbed. But after a few tense moments, there was a soft click, and the lock opened. They hesitated for a moment, then slowly lifted the lid. Inside the box, they found a small, ancient-looking book. Jack carefully picked up the book and opened it. The pages were filled with strange writings and drawings, similar to the symbols on the box. But there was something else: a map. The map showed the location of a hidden treasure, buried deep within the ship. This must be what the spirits are protecting, Sarah said. The treasure is cursed, and they don't want anyone to find it. But Jack wasn't so sure. What if this treasure is the key to freeing the spirits? Maybe if we find it, we can break the curse. Chapter 11: The Hidden Treasure. Determined to find the treasure and uncover the truth, Jack and Sarah followed the map deeper into the ship. The air grew colder with every step, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The ship's moaning and creaking grew louder, as if it was trying to warn them to turn back. The map led them to a hidden door at the end of a long, narrow corridor. The door was old and covered in thick layers of dust and cobwebs. Jack pushed it open, and they stepped inside. The room was dark, with only a small beam of light coming from a crack in the ceiling. In the center of the room was a large chest, much bigger than the one they had found before. This chest was made of dark wood, with iron bands and more of the strange symbols carved into it. Jack and Sarah approached the chest cautiously. The air around it felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the chest was radiating some kind of dark energy. Jack knelt down and touched the chest. It was cold, almost like ice. He tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. "There must be a way to open it," Sarah said, looking around the room. "Maybe there's a key or something." As they searched the room, they noticed a faint glow coming from the walls. When they looked closer, they saw that the walls were covered in symbols similar to those on the chest and the box. "These symbols must be the key," Jack said. "We need to figure out what they mean." They took out the book they had found in the box and began to study the symbols. The book described an ancient ritual that could be used to unlock the chest. But the ritual was complicated, and they had to perform it exactly as written. Chapter 12: The Ritual. Jack and Sarah carefully followed the instructions in the book. They placed candles in each corner of the room, creating a circle of light around the chest. Then they sprinkled salt on the floor, forming a protective barrier. As they performed the ritual, the air in the room grew colder. The ship began to creak and moan more loudly, as if it was reacting to what they were doing. The shadows on the walls started to move, swirling around them like a dark fog. Finally, they reached the last part of the ritual. Jack took a deep breath and read the final words from the book. "Underscore by the light of the moon and the power of the sea, I command thee, spirits, to reveal thy treasure and set thy souls free. Underscore." As soon as he spoke the words, the chest began to shake. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and the room was filled with a blinding light. Jack and Sarah shielded their eyes as the chest slowly opened. When the light faded, they looked inside the chest. To their surprise, it wasn't filled with gold or jewels. Instead, there was a single, glowing crystal, pulsing with a soft, blue light. "What is this?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with awe. Jack reached out and touched the crystal. The moment he did, the ship fell silent. The creaking stopped, the moaning ceased, and the shadows disappeared. The air became warmer, and the oppressive feeling lifted. "I think this is the heart of the ship," Jack said softly. "This crystal is what's been keeping the spirits trapped here." Chapter 13: Freeing the Spirits. Jack and Sarah knew what they had to do. They had to take the crystal and release it into the sea. It was the only way to break the curse and free the spirits. They carefully carried the crystal back up to the deck. As they stepped outside, they noticed that the fog had lifted, and the night sky was clear. The moon shone brightly, lighting their way. They stood at the edge of the ship, holding the crystal between them. For a moment, they hesitated. What if releasing the crystal brought more danger? What if it unleashed something they couldn't control, but they knew they had no